Verse 5. The king said, Behold, it is yet early morn. Let the officers go fetch all who have escaped beyond the walls, and both mothers and child shall be put to death. Till then, let the proceedings be suspended. Now there had congregated a vast multitude to witness the slaughter, and when the king suspended matters, there went up cries of disappointment. And many said, When the thing touched the king, he is a coward. Verse 6. The king returned for his palace, leaving Asha standing stripped for the execution. And the multitude cried out, More is Asha like a king. Let us make him king, king of the sun. We will not have a sheep for a king. And none could stay them or be heard above their noises. And they ran after the king and slew him with stones. And they made Asha king of the sun. And there was not one infant slain according to the decree. Verse 7. God said, Think not, O man, that things happen without a cause, or that all things are left to chance. In my works I go beforehand and plan the way, even more carefully than a captain lies siege to a city. Before Zarathustra was born, I sent guardian angels to choose out personages. Think not that Asha made his own argument, but by virtue of the presence of my guardian angels, whom he saw not, he spoke on behalf in my commandments, not knowing it. And even so was it with the king's wife. My angels also inspired her to speak before the king. And those that fled out of the city were inspired by my host of angels. Verse 8. God said, Yet with the king's decree I had no part, for I foresaw he would do this on his own will. With the multitude slaying the king I had no part, for I saw they would do this on their own account. Neither would the multitude hear my voice, even though I had spoken to every man's soul, for in them the tetrachs were the ascending power. Verse 9. God said, The multitude slew the king, because he had gone so far from me, he heeded me not. And I made Asha king, because he came so near me, my power was with him through my guardian angels. Book of God's Word, chapter 6, 1-5, verse 1. During the infant age of Zarathustra, God manifested no more through him, but he sent Ijah, one of his lords, to be with Zarathustra day and night. And Ijah taught the infant wisdom in all things, but showed himself to none else. Verse 2. When Zarathustra was half grown, the Lord began to manifest through him, giving signs and miracles and prophecy before the Lycians, or shepherd kings, who lived in the forest of goats. This forest was of the width in every direction, except the east, a 40 days' journey for a man. And in all that region there were no houses, the inhabitants living in tents made of bark and skin. Verse 3. The Lord inspired Zarathustra to teach them to build houses, and to tame the goats, and to live in cities, and otherwise to do the earth through righteousness. The chief center of their inhabitation being on the river Aphrodion and its tributaries. And it was from these inhabitants that sprang in after years the migrants called Phoenicians, signifying out of the mountains. Nevertheless, these people were Ahuans, but because of the cruelties of the Persian kings, they fled and lived in the forests. Verse 4. The Lord said to Zarathustra, Behold, the people who flee from the king, I have made them kings over goats and over the beasts of the fields. Verse 5. And from this time forth the Lycians styled themselves shepherd kings, and Zarathustra taught them of the Lord, that man should have dominion over the beasts of the forest, but that no man should hold dominion over his neighbor. Consequently, every man of the Lycians, or shepherd kings, styled himself a king, and every woman styled herself a queen. Book of God's Word, chapter 6, verse 6-10. Again the Lord said to Zarathustra, Go thou, my son, whither I will lead thee, and thou shalt find a people sacred to the Great Spirit. So Zarathustra wandered beyond the forest of goats, and came to Harawataj, to the south of the mountain of Otaka, where there were 3 large cities and 12 small ones, inhabited by Ions. Verse 7. And the Lord had been with the Ions, and foretold them Zarathustra was coming, so that it was proven on both sides. The Lord said to the high priest, Thou shalt suffer Zarathustra to come within thy walls, of the city, for he is pure. Verse 8. So Zarathustra went in, and in the time of worship before the altar of God, the Lord appeared in a great light, and commanded the high priest, saying, Behold, I have brought my son to thee. Him shalt thou anoint as priest, according to the iron laws, and thou shalt teach him the rites and ceremonies of the ancients. Verse 9. Accordingly, Zarathustra was made a priest, and was otherwise accepted as an iron, and bestowed under the rod with water and with fire. And he also taught the sacred words, and the art of writing, and making tablets, and of weaving cloth, and making clothes from hemp. Verse 10. 7 years Zarathustra remained with the irons, fasting and praying, singing and dancing before the Lord. And then the Lord commanded him to return through the forest of goats, the which he did, teaching before the Lycians, or shepherd kings, wheresoever he halted for a rest. And the Lord was with him, working miracles. Verse 11. At the end of another 7 years, the Lord said to Zarathustra, Behold, the dawn of light is come. Thou shalt therefore bestow thy mother with thy people, and I will lead thee to the city of thy birth. Zarathustra said, Tell me, O Lord, of the city of my birth. Verse 12. The Lord said, It is a great city, but it shall fall before thy hand. For God hath turned his favor away from its king. Verse 13. In 2 days' journey Zarathustra came to Os, and entered into the city, but he provided no provender with him. Now it was a law of Os that all strangers coming into the city should bring provender as a testimony of fidelity to the laws and to the king. So when he came to the inner gate, the keeper asked him for provender, but Zarathustra answered him, saying, verse 14, Naked I came into the world, and Creator asked me not for provender. Is thy king greater than the Creator? Verse 15. The keeper said, I know not thy words. Shall a servant explain laws? To which Zarathustra said, Thou art wise, neither shalt thou suffer for disobedience in letting me pass. The Lord will give thee food. Verse 16. And when he had spoken thus, there fell at the feet of the keeper an abundance of fruit. And the keeper feared and stood aside, suffering Zarathustra to pass in. The keeper not only told the people of the miracle, but ran and told the king likewise. This was Asha, who had reigned since the death of the old Sun King. And Asha no sooner heard of the miracle than he imagined the person to be the same who had he seen in his infancy. Verse 17. Asha the king sent officers at once to find Zarathustra and bring him before the court. But the Lord, knowing these things, inspired Zarathustra to go on his own account, and he went accordingly before the king, even before the officers returned. Verse 18. The king said, Who art thou, and for what purpose hast thou come before the king? Verse 19. Then spoke God through Zarathustra, saying, I am God, God of the Ahuans. He through whom I speak is Zarathustra, whom thou sawest in his mother's arms. We twain are one. I have come before thee, O king, because of 2 reasons. Thou hast sent for me, and I desire to use thee. Verse 20. The king said, Speak further, stranger, that I may approve of thy words. Verse 21. Said God, I made thee king of Os, and from that day to this my guardian angels have been with thee, and heard thee often praying privately for information of the infant thou sawest, for it rests heavily on thy judgment, whether no man be immortal. Sit thou with me this night privately, and I will show thee the soul of the king. Book of God's Word, chapter 7, verse 1 through 4. When night came, the king sat privately with Zarathustra, and God cast a light on the wall, and the soul of the king came and appeared before Asha. And the king said, Know thou who I am? And Asha said, Yea, the king. Verse 2, the king said, True, O king, the soul is immortal. And then it disappeared. Asha said, It seems to be the king, and yet, if it were he, would he not have called me Asha instead of O king? Then spoke Zarathustra, saying, Call thou for some other spirit. Asha said, Suffer then the soul of my wife to appear. Verse 3. Again the light appeared, and the soul of Asha's wife inhabited it, and he saw her. Asha said, "It is, indeed." And then she disappeared. Asha said, "Had it been she,